Assalamu alaikum. We shall begin with lecture 31 today, and I shall look at the last poet of the course with you. The last poet that we are going to do for this program is W.H. Auden, another remarkable post-war modern poet, and following in the same tradition of the other modern poets. But again, like I told you in the previous lecture, he has his own individual character and his own style. As we shall see, he is different from both Thomas Dillon and Philip Larkin, whom we discussed as post-war modern poets. Each one of them keeping within that those general characteristics of the modernist tradition and the symbolist movement, do have their own individual character, and they do exhibit their own individual styles, as we saw with Dylan Thomas in the previous lecture, how he used a different kind of syntax, and how he liked to experiment with syntax, how he liked to disturb the order of the words in the line, in a sentence, in an utterance. So that was a peculiar feature of Dylan Thomas, and the combined effect of that syntax with the symbols and images and metaphors or similes that he uses, the readers are tangled. They are tangled up in a mystery. They're confused with the combined effect of the two, and the actual meaning of the poem and the actual themes of the poem are rather difficult to discern. As a result of which, as is common with these poets, their poems or their works, they are liable to multiple interpretations, but keeping within the understanding that is generated from those symbols or those images. Naturally, our interpretation cannot be as far-fetched that it defies any real connection with the actual symbols that he has used in the poem. So within that framework, it is within that framework that you have to interpret their poems. When I kept telling you in those previous lectures that you can analyze their works and you can come up with your own interpretations, I did not mean that you could stretch so far so as to ignore the certain traditional meaning of a symbol or a metaphor or a simile. You have to stay within the limitation that is ascribed by art, and you have to understand the tone and the mood of the poem and the tone and the mood of the poet, and keeping all of that in mind, you come to a complete, and you come to a better understanding of the poem. So when you are interpreting the poems, the first task that you have to do is to reread them. You have to read these poems over and over again, and this rereading will make you familiar with the style and the technique and the form of the poet. And when you become familiar with their style, because it's this style or different techniques, these are significant features of these modern poets. So when you become familiar with the style of the poet and how it is used by the poet, how it is used as a technique by a poet, when you become familiar with that and you begin to understand it, then you can start to understand the content, the themes, the various themes that might emerge from the poem. So the first step is to bring yourself into close connection or harmony with the style of the writer, and once you've achieved that, then the symbols or the images or the connections between them or the paradoxes between them, they will all be laid bare to you, and you will feel that you have reached a better understanding of the work. So my advice to you is to use that approach with these poets and their poems. We looked at Dylan Thomas's poetry, we looked at Philip Larkin, and we saw how lyrical their poetry was, and what beautiful effect it had on the reader, despite the fact that the ideas were ambiguous despite the fact that it was not easy to understand what they were actually hinting at. But the beauty of the lyrics and the lyricism, the beautiful movement of the lines, that makes their poetry worth reading. Let us now today start with Auden, and I'm going to discuss and analyze two poems of Auden with you. One is a very representative poem of Auden, and the two poems, I hope, will give you a better idea of the kind of poet that Auden was, and how his style and his themes, how they were different from the other poets of his time. Let's find out something about Auden first. Now, Auden was an Anglo-American poet and one of the leading literary figures of the 20th century. He was also amongst the famous literary figures of the 20th century. Again, an Anglo-American poet. He also got citizenship of America, although he was born in York. As you can see, he was born in England, but spent some of his time in America as well. He died in Austria. In fact, he didn't even die in his home country. So Wystan Hugh Auden is his full name. WH stands for Wystan Hugh Auden. He was born in York on 21st February 1907, and he died in Austria on 29th December, 1973. So covering the whole span of the 20th century. He saw both the world wars, so he must have been influenced by the social and the political changes taking place in the country. And we shall see that unlike Dylan, he does focus on social and the political themes, and he is concerned with certain serious aspects of human relationships and nature. Like Philip Larkin, we shall see that he explores the everyday phenomena. Now, Auden won the Pulitzer Prize in 1948 for The Age of Anxiety. And much of his poetry is concerned with moral issues and evidences a strong political, social, and psychological context. This you should always bear in mind. So he does talk about, his themes revolve around moral issues, and there are strong political, social, and psychological issues that are also discussed in some of his poems. His poetry is versatile and inventive. Like the other modern poets, we shall see once again that he also likes to experiment with the verse. He likes to experiment in his poems, and we shall find it in his poems when we discuss them. So versatile poet, inventive poet, experimenting with new forms and inventing new forms. His linguistic innovations even earned him the adjective Audenesque, because his language is crisp and terse. It's often compared to that of the language used in a telegram. It consists ellipses, and sometimes abbreviations are also there. It is so colloquial, in fact, that it has earned him the title, a separate title, and his language is called Audenesque. Now, his poems are fragmentary and terse, relying on concrete images and colloquial language to convey Auden's political and psychological concerns. His poems are fragmentary and terse, and this you shall find when we read his poems. Fragmentary because he doesn't explain. They are brief sketches, as if they are brief sketches of feelings, emotions, experiences, or scenes. So they are fragmentary. They are never offering us a complete picture. They are broken images. And terse, he uses short, crisp sentences, relying often on concrete images and colloquial language to convey Auden's political and psychological. So they when he's describing his political or psychological concerns, he relies on concrete images and colloquial language. As we shall see, one of the poems which deals with the psychological concerns, how he employs, he mixes the colloquial language with the metaphors, symbols and images. Now, Robert Bloom, writing in PMLA, commented about Auden's writing in 1930 that the omission of articles, demonstrative adjectives, subjects, conjunctions, relative pronouns, auxiliary verbs form a language of extremity and urgency. So he says the impression that we get of his poems is that he is in a great hurry. He's writing urgently, and that he's in some sort of great urgency. That is why he's he is omitting articles, he's omitting demonstrative adjectives like that, this, and he sometimes even omits subjects. Conjunctions are missing, relative pronouns may be missing, auxiliary verbs may be missing. So his language has, or his poems have this show of urgency, like telegraphies. I told you, like the language of the telegram, in the telegrams. It has time and patience only for the most important words. So words, like we saw with Dylan Thomas, he paid special attention to his choice of words. His poetry, Dylan Thomas's poetry, was also terse. It was also economical. He was not very verbose, but he paid special attention to the quality of the word, to the choice of words that he used in his poems. In a similar way, we see here that Auden is also very conscious of the words that he picks for his poems. So he has time and patience only for the most important words, and he seems to ignore the unimportance. Most of them are the structural words that are missing from his poetry. So this is a special characteristic of Auden's poetry. Now, the first poem that we are going to look at is a brief poem that I've selected for you. The second one is a longer one, so I thought we should do it towards the end. The first brief one will introduce you to the character of this poet, Auden. It will introduce you to the simplicity of, but at the same time, the beauty of the language, the beauty of the lyric, because you shall see how easy his verses move. But at the same time, the ambivalence, the paradoxes, the contradictions that we found in the poetry of the other two poets, we shall find them here also. So despite the fact that on the surface everything is gentle and smooth, but we shall find gaps in that gentleness. We shall find places, spaces, pauses where doubts, skepticism, cynicism seems to be making its presence felt, and naturally those are the doubts, those are the skepticism and the cynicism of the poet or the speaker. In fact, I need to make it clear here that these modern poets, unlike the Romantic poets, it's not that they are always visible in their own works. Unlike the Romantic poets, they like to stand apart. So when we refer to the person, the persona in their poems, we refer to it as to him as a speaker. We don't refer to him as a poet. We do that sometimes. We may refer the ideas and the feelings and the concepts back to the poet, but it is not the actual voice of the poet that is dominated in the poem itself, like it used to happen with the Romantics. There was a heavy presence of the poet himself in his works in the Romantic age. So look at the title of the poem. The title says, "The More Loving One." The more loving one. So the title suggests that the poem will be about love, and the poem can be about a couple. The poem can be about two individuals, and focusing more on the one who is able to love more, who is able to give more love. So the more loving one is not the one who's the recipient, who's at the receiving end. In fact, he's the one who's giving more love, who is able to show more love, who is able to show more compassion. So the more loving one is the one who's able to sacrifice his own needs, who's able to ignore his own self, and who's able to in fact negate his own self and give up everything for the sake of the beloved. Let's begin with the first stanza. Thus you can see I have not looked at the form of the poem with you. We shall do it towards the end because I don't want to mar the beauty of the poem. So, but looking at this first stanza, you can see that it consists of 4 lines. It's a quatrain, and if you look at the rhyme scheme, if you look at the last words at the end of each line, well, hell, beast, least, beast, you can see that it rhymes, A and then B. So let's begin with the poem. He says, looking up at the stars, I know quite well that for all they care, I can go to hell. But on earth, indifference is the least we have to dread from man or beast. So in the very opening lines, the title suggested that the poem is about love. But the first 4 lines tell us that it is about indifference. So from the beginning, the theme of indifference is introduced in the poem. And he says, looking up at the stars, I know quite well that for all they care, I can go to hell. So here the speaker is describing the attitude, let's say the beloved. So he's, if by stars he may mean the beloved, by stars he may mean society, by stars he may mean humanity in general. So stars become the metaphor for these people. So he says, when I look at the stars, they are so far off from me. So the distance is also described in the poem here. The sky, the gap between the sky and the earth, how far they are from each other. And it also has to do with height. One is so far above and the other one is so far below. So the distance between the two is also great. That can never be bridged. One is that idea. So he says, looking up at the stars. And then there is also maybe the differences in the social status of people. So he says, when I look up at the stars, I as an insignificant creature, he says, when I look up at the stars, I know quite well, he says, I can feel it in my heart that they do not care for me. That for as far as it matters to them, I can go to hell. This is the worst he can imagine. He doesn't talk about death. He doesn't say, as far as they are concerned, I can die. But he says, I can go to hell. Even after death, he says, what do they care? Even after death, I may not escape the misery, the pain. But on earth, indifference is the least we have to dread from man or beast. And then look at the last 2 lines. And he says that on earth, the indifference is the least we have to dread from man. And then on earth, he says, the picture is no different. And we experience indifference. We experience things worse in form than indifference. He says indifference is the least we have to dread from man or beast. So he said man or beast on the earth, they inflict more misery on us, they inflict more pain on us than the misery of indifference. So the theme of indifference, the theme of unrequited love, the theme of love not returned is introduced from the very beginning, and its effect on the lover is introduced from the very beginning. He feels helpless, he feels he's miserable, and he feels that there is no place for him in this world, and there is no place for him in the other world too. So he feels that the pain of indifference from the beloved is more than any other form of cruelty which he gets from anyone else. That is why he gives us this comparison. And then in the next stanza he says, how should we like it were stars to burn with a passion for us we could not return? If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. Now he's trying to console himself in this stanza. He says, how should we like it were stars to burn with a passion for us we could not return? And now he's putting himself in the position of the stars. Now he's defending the stars. Now he's defending community, humanity, or most importantly, the beloved. He says, how would we feel if the stars were to burn with a passion for us we could not return? So he says this places were switched, and the stars burned in love for us. The stars burned for attention, to seek attention from us. And he says, and if the stars turned their gaze towards us, and we never could not return, I couldn't return the same passion to the star, to my star. So here he's changing the positions, because he's trying to show how painful it is. He's trying to remind the stars that if you were burning in love, with passion for someone, how would you feel? Because he's put a question. But he says, another interpretation of the lines can be when he says, how should we like it? He says, would we like it? Would we like someone else to burn in passion for us, to feel the agony of the unrequited or unreturned love? If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me. And then he says, if there is no compatible or exchange of emotions, if there cannot be the two-way love on both sides, if it is just one way, he says, if we cannot have equal affection, if both cannot love each other, he says, let the more loving one be me. He says, in that case, I shall still go on loving, and the more loving one will be me. So he says, I shall go on loving regardless of whether my love is returned, regardless of the fact whether my love is requited or not. So he says that his love for the other will continue. In stanza 3, he says, admirer as I think I am, of stars that do not give a damn, I cannot, now I see them, say I missed one terribly all day. Now in this stanza he's going to turn things upside down. There is a paradox that is introduced here. He says, admirer as I think I am of stars that do not give a damn. He says, as he said clearly, plainly in the last stanza, that he shall go on loving the stars even if they do not return his love. He says, so although I am a great admirer of the stars, and I know that they do not and they will not return my love, I cannot, now I see them, say I missed one terribly all day. Now this is a shift in emotions and feelings and the paradox here. Now he says, I missed one terribly all day. Now we know that at daytime the stars are not visible. We see these stars only at night, in the night sky. So when they are all gone at daytime, he says, I cannot say that I missed them. I cannot say that I missed their presence at daytime when they were visible. So he says that he was hardly aware of their absence. So this is the contradiction of, first he said that even if her love is not returned, he shall go on loving. But now he says that his emotions are changing. Their absence now does not disturb them. He says, their absence does not even disturb me. Although I cannot see them at daytime, but I don't miss them. I don't miss their presence. Were all stars to disappear or die, I should learn to look at an empty sky and feel its total dark sublime, though this might take me a little time. Now he's imagining a situation. He says, if all the stars, and at night time, if they were to disappear altogether. So first he talked about the daytime when they are not there in the sky, but then he says, if even at night time they were to disappear altogether, if they were to die, I should learn to look at an empty sky. He said, nothing will happen, nothing will change, I will not die, but I shall learn to look on the empty sky and feel its total dark sublime. And look at this phrase, total dark sublime. So the darkness here has also this sublimity. It has got this, this serenity. It has got this, the grace. So he says, shall not feel empty. I should learn to look at the empty sky. He says, I will become used to the empty black sky, empty dark sky also, and I will get used to its vastness without the stars, though this might take me a little time. And the last line is a line of consolation, where he says, yes, he agrees that time, it will take time. It will take time for me to forget the love that I had, or to let go of the love that I had for my beloved, but it is possible. It will only take some time. So time, you can see here, is described as a healer of love. Passing time, here poet describes as something that heals the lovers, and it heals the anguish and the pain of the lovers. It heals broken hearts. So time has a great influence. It has a great power on the lovers. So in this poem, we saw the language was very simple. The images, although are many images. In every stanza, the poet is describing and creating a new image, and through the image, he emphasizes his theme. But the theme is plain, and the language itself is also plain in the poem. Let's look at the first point of the analysis. Auden effectively uses symbolism and representation to build his theme of indifference. Let's look at the first point. Auden effectively uses symbolism and representation to build his theme on indifference and how it became a common phenomenon of modern society. So we can stretch the theme, we can apply it to the whole society. I told you at one level it's about the lover and the beloved, but you can apply it to humanity at large, to the society at large, as I said. So he says it can, through the symbols and through the images, he uses the theme of indifference and applies as a tragedy of phenomena of the modern society, that we as human beings have become indifferent. Because as you saw in the first two stanzas of the poem, he was crying over the indifference of the stars. He was lamenting over the indifferent attitude of the stars, and he was distressed by the indifferent attitudes of the stars. But in the next two stanzas, we see that he himself is becoming indifferent. He becomes indifferent himself, and because towards the end he says that he too will learn to forget as time passes. So the whole of the poem, it elaborates upon this theme of indifference, how the whole society has become indifferent now. Auden uses the stars throughout the poem to represent the general population, as I told you, or the loved ones, and how people show a lack of concern for others. And this lack of concern is basically indifference. The poet used the skies containing millions of stars to represent people, and the earth to represent detachment between people. This I've already discussed with you. And the message of the poem appears to be that we should be more loving, and we need to divorce ourselves from the darkness of indifference. This is the message of the poem. But you see, the actual theme of the poem is the indifferent attitude of the people generally. The next point is that the poet wants to be the more loving one than the one to show indifference to those that love. Now, if we compare the theme of the poem, the theme of indifference, to the title of the poem, we can say that the poet wants to be the more loving one. He says, the title says the more loving one. But then the paradox the poet shows to us in the end, the desire was to become the more loving one, but he says that the society or the pain has also made him indifferent, has also turned him into an indifferent individual. So he says he will no longer become or remain the more loving one. The symbolism and contradictions lend beauty to the otherwise simple poem. Now, we are now going to look at a slightly longer poem of Auden. This poem that we've just discussed consisted only of 4 stanzas of 4 lines each, and the language was simple, and the idea or the theme was also singular. We shall see how in the next poem the thought or his thought process moves from the stanza to stanza, and how the images are linked, and how the theme is linked, and how the theme emerges out with contradictions and paradoxes towards the end of the poem. And this second poem is titled As I Walked Out One Evening. As I walked out one evening. As you shall see, these first lines, the titles of the poems are the first lines of the poem themselves. So he's talking about his walk in the evening, because he says, as I walked out one evening. Look at the colloquial style in which he starts his poem. As I walked out one evening. So he's describing to you what he witnessed when he went for a walk in the evening. Briefly about the poem. The poem is an allegorical conversation between love and time. So it is an allegory. It is an allegorical representation of love and time. Love and time become human-like figures, or they become they have a voice, the omniscient voice in the poem, and they are talking to each other, and they are discussing the power of love to over eternity, or the power of eternity over love. So they are trying to deduce, they are trying to discuss which one is supreme, which one is more powerful. Is love more powerful than time, or is time more powerful than love? So this is the main theme of the poem. But as I said earlier on, it is an allegorical conversation. Many of the poems, in fact, have been written which are allegorical conversations of, sometimes between birds. There are so many instances in the history of English poetry itself, and in Urdu poetry also we have instances where we have Iqbal, when he's writing about children, when he's writing poems for children, we have these shorter poems where he's giving a message to the children through this allegorical dialogue, conversation between sometimes animals, sometimes an animal and a bird. So in a similar way, this is an allegorical conversation, but here it's not an animal that is used, but it is between love, which is personified, and time, which is also personified. Auden wrote the poem in 1937, and it was first published in 1940 volume, the volume Another Time. Let us now look at the poem. So let us look at the poem now. And let's start with stanza 1. Take a look at the stanza. You see that the stanza is written in 4 lines. It is once again a quatrain, and if you look at the last words of each line, you shall see that they do not have a regular rhyming pattern. Like evening doesn't rhyme with any other word in the stanza. The street rhymes with wheat, but pavement doesn't rhyme with anything. So this rhyme scheme is A, B, and then C, B. And in the same way, the rhyme scheme will differ in each stanza. But the sentences are short. The language apparently is simple. But we shall see that with the help of different images, with the help of different poetic devices, the poet is going to achieve a depth in meaning. We shall see that by juxtaposing different symbols, juxtaposing different metaphors, juxtaposing different images, the poet is going to put across his message to us in a more effective manner. Let us begin with the stanza now. He says, as I walked out one evening, walking down Bristol Street, The crowds upon the pavement were fields of harvest wheat. Now he's describing the event to you, and he gives you the exact time, place. He says one evening. So the walk took place one evening, and he tells you where. He went down the Bristol Street. And the last two lines then are significant. He says the crowds then are compared to the fields of harvest. The metaphor that is used for the crowds is a field of harvest. And the image that he's creating for you is that of the autumn season, because harvesting is done in the autumn season, which we have learned in so many times, now. So it is the image of autumn season that the poet evokes in your mind. And he says that these crowds on the footpaths, this crowd of people on the pavement, they appeared to him as the fields of harvesting wheat. So the autumn or fall is a season of harvest, and here it is used as a metaphor for old age. Maybe we can say that. So he's talking about the act of passing time, or by referring to the autumn season here, he may be referring again, you have to bear in mind that the autumn season is followed by the winter season, which is a season of death. So autumn may refer, as I told you in the previous lecture, to the adulthood. It refers to old age, which is then followed by death. So he says that the crowds upon the pavement were fields of harvest wheat. So these people, this crowd of people whom he is comparing to the fields of harvest, to these fields in the autumn season, ready to be cut and ready to be reaped, ready for harvest. He says he is giving us the impression that time is passing, that time does not stop for anyone, it is passing. So he's reminded of our journey to the winter year. So he's reminding us of what is to come, of the impending death. And down by the brimming river I heard a long lover sing under an arch of the railway, love has no ending. He says, and then as he passed by the pavements and he went down the brimming river, he went towards the river which was full, which was overflowing at that time of the year. I heard a lover sing under an arch of the railway, and he heard the lover talking to his beloved, in fact singing for his beloved under the bridge for the railway, built for the railway line. And what was he singing about? He says he was saying love has no ending. Love has no ending. So love remains true forever. This is what they are both singing for each other. This is what they are exchanging with each other. This is what they are reminding each other of, that love is always remains true. It has no ending, and it is always there. And then the promises that they are making to each other. He says, one of them says, I love you dear, I love you, till China and Africa meet, and the river jumps over the mountain and the salmon sing in the street. Now these are what we call hyperboles. These are exaggerated statements. But in love we do tend to make such exaggerated statements, such hyperboles. So the poet is also offering us a true picture. He's giving us a real picture of the emotions of those lovers. So, and by doing that, he's showing to us how unrealistic they are, and how untrue all of this is. So the paradox actually is that all of this is ironical, and the irony will come out towards the end of the poem also. But we see here this hyperbole, this exaggeration is deliberate on part of the poet, because he wants to show through these exaggerated emotions, through these hyperbole, that these are not actually true, that and that they have their shortcomings. So these exaggerated promises are that he say once the lover says that I shall love you till China and Africa meet, till the two continents meet, and the river jumps over the mountain, and the river can somehow miraculously climb the mountain, and the salmon sing in the streets. If the salmon, it's the fish of cold water, it walks in the street and is singing. So he's talking about impossible things. And then further on he says, I love you till the ocean is folded and hung up to dry, and the 7 stars go squawking like geese about the sky. So look at the passion, the intensity of the lover. He says, I love you till the ocean is folded and hung up to dry. Now the oceans are beds of water. Their oceans consist of water. So he says, I will love you until something as impossible as the ocean drying up and being used as a cloth, being dried, all the water being shaken out of it and folded and hung up to dry. So I shall love you until the oceans become dry, which naturally is impossible to happen. And the 7 stars go squawking like geese about the sky. And then he's talking about a constellation in the sky. And he says, when this constellation of 7 stars, what does it do? It goes squawking like geese about the sky. And when the stars start to move, and when they start to squeak like a duck, squawk like duck, or squawk like geese, and when they start talking. So until that happens, he says, I shall keep on loving you. So love is the same theme that that the song introduced, the love song that the lover was singing, like love has no end. So it is the same thing, theme that is introduced in these promises that these lovers are making to each other, that their love will never end until so and so and so and such and such and such happens. And as we can see from the things that he mentions, they will never happen. So the promises being made are so unrealistic. Then in stanza 5, he says, the years shall run like rabbits, for in my arms I hold the flower of the ages and the first love of the world. Now, he says that years shall run like rabbits. The years pass, time pass, and when he compares them to rabbits, the simile that is used for years or the passing time is the movement of the rabbits. A rabbit can run really fast. So he says the years or the time is passing quickly. The years run fast as a rabbit. But he says, for in my arms I hold the flower of the ages. But he says, when I am in love, when we are in love, what happens? The time stops. Our time, the years may be running on, the time may be passing, but he says, I still hold in my arms the flower of the ages. So all the ages that have passed, all the years that have passed, he says, that flower, the flower of all those ages, which is love. Here flower is a metaphor for love. He says, so my love, I still hold it in the palm of my hands. I still hold it in my hands. So although the time has passed, and even if the years pass, more years pass, he says, I shall always hold that flower of love in my arms and the first love of the world, and I shall always keep alive that spark of first love in me. So here the poet is implying that love will beat time, that love will overcome time, that love overcomes time. So what he's saying is that love overcomes time, that love can surpass time, that love can beat time. So the one aspect of the theme of the poem is complete here, with the poet introducing love overcoming time, and he introduces it through the love exchanges or the exchanges of promises between the lovers. But up till now, we have not heard the voice of the time. In the next stanza, now see a change will occur. The poet tells us, but all the clocks in the city began to whir and chime. Oh, let not time deceive you, you cannot conquer time. Now, what is happening? After that statement that time cannot be, time is beaten by love. After that statement, the time which is personified here, it wakes up. And all the clocks in the city, they begin to whir and chime. They all begin to chime. They all begin to sound. They all come to life as if they have been challenged by someone. And love has actually challenged time. So time now feels that it has to respond. So what does the time say? He says, oh, let not time deceive you. You cannot conquer time. So in the very opening lines, time accepts the challenge of the love. And he says, don't be deceived by time. But because you are mistaken, and you cannot, oh love, you cannot conquer time. So time here is reminding the lovers that they are mortals and they can never transcend time. And he will do so in detail in the next stanzas. In the burrows of the nightmare, where justice naked is, time watches from the shadow and cuffs when you would kiss. Now he lays bare the ugly realities. The lovers or love in its intensity and in its emotions was hyperbolic, was mindless and thoughtless of actual reality. But time is now going to remind love of the ugly reality. He says, in the burrows of the nightmare where justice naked is, in the burrows are the deep, like the deep caves, the deep graves inside the earth. He says, in the burrows of the earth, the nightmare again is personified here because it is written with a capital N. In the deep burrows of the earth, in the depths of the earth, where nightmare lives. So nightmare, because the lovers are dreaming of a beautiful world. So they are seeing a beautiful dream and they are envisioning a beautiful world, and all they are seeing are sweet dreams. But time is now shattering those sweet dreams by bringing in the idea of the nightmare. So he says, you are dreaming, you're still dreaming sweetly, but you've forgotten that under the earth lives nightmare. And where nightmare lives, their justice is naked. There is no justice there. Justice is without any, is stripped of its dignity when it is with nightmare. So when there is no justice, naturally, how can there be love? This is what time is saying. So justice is also a captive of nightmare. Justice cannot escape nightmare, and it cannot be part of the sweet dreams of the lovers. So he's trying to remind, time is trying to remind love that in this world, in this ugly world, in this materialistic world, there is no justice. So love can never have its glorious future. Time watches from the shadow and cuffs when you would kiss. And then he says, when you attempt to kiss, when the lovers attempt to kiss or express love, each other's love for each other, he says, time watches from the shadow, like a lurking animal, like some demon or like some ghost. It watches from the shadow and cuffs. And cuffing act is meant to interrupt them. It is meant to remind them, it is that of its presence, that it is there, to bring back to reality. So the act of kissing is actually an act of unreality, an act which takes them to an unreal world. And it is an act of love which dissociates them from the real world. He says, but the cuffing of time by time, it brings them back to reality, or it tries to bring them back to the reality. In stanza 8 he says, in headaches and in worry, vaguely life leaks away, and time will have his fancy tomorrow or today. And this is significant here because in the third line it says, time will have his fancy. So time will have his way. If he's reminding love that time does succeed. The time will overcome love. It does overcome love. He says, in headaches and in worry, vaguely life leaks away. Life is passing. How is the life passing? He says, in headaches and in worry. So life is passing in distress. Life is passing in worry. And time will have his fancy tomorrow or today. And he says, your challenge I have accepted. And today or tomorrow, time will have his way. I will have his way in any other form or in the form of death. So love will come to an end. There will be separation. If not in any other way, in the form of death. Time will win. In stanza 9 he says, into many a green valley drifts the appalling snow. Time breaks the threaded dances, but the diver's brilliant bow, and the diver's brilliant bow. Now look what he's doing here. He says, into many a green valley drifts. Look at the images that he's creating for you. First he talks about the green valley, and then he talks about the appalling snow. So opposing images are pitched against each other. So he says, in many green valleys also hide the appalling snow. So the green valleys also hide appalling, ugly and scary snows. So there is not always all beauty. Beauty also hides ugliness, and beauty and ugliness are always at one place. You cannot separate them. So green valleys also hide, he says, appalling snow. And time breaks the threaded dances, and the diver's brilliant bow. He says, time breaks the threaded dances. And he takes the dancers, talks about the dancers, the image of the dancers who are threading, who are circling around. And he says, time is able to break their dance. It is time which achieves that break, which ends their dance. And it is time which breaks the diver's brilliant bow, when the diver is ready to jump into the water and bows gracefully and then dives. He says, so the diver's act is also an act of passing time, because his graceful bow does not remain suspended in time. He doesn't remain in that posture forever, but it moves on and he slides gracefully into the water. In the same way, the dancers dance. They do not keep on dancing for all life to an end, but their dance is also broken, or it is completed by time, with the help of time. So he is trying to show how time has power over men's lives, how without time, he's reminding love, nothing can make sense. This world cannot make sense. And how he says, without the actual realities, without whether they be ugly, without pain, he says, how can there be happiness? Because he talks about green valley and then appalling snow. So appalling snow is a metaphor for the ugliness, maybe. It is also a metaphor for sadness. It is a metaphor for sorrow. It's a metaphor for death. So he then contrasts it with green valley, which is a metaphor for life, which is a metaphor for happiness, which is a metaphor for beauty. So he says how, they're both together. Sorrow also hides happiness, and in happiness dwells sorrow. So love is not anything without time. In stanza 10 he says, oh, plunge your hands in water, plunge them in up the wrist, stare in the basin, and wonder what you have missed. Now he's repeating certain words, plunge and plunge. Plunge, put your hands in water, plunge them in up to the wrist, plunge them in water, put them in water. But the act of plunging is the act of deliberate, is an act of design. He says, stare in the basin, and look closely in the basin and wonder what you have missed. Some critics, as I've mentioned here, have referred to it as an act of suicide on parts of some of the lovers. He says, when some lovers attempt, when they are so dejected by dejectedly brought back to the real world and to the reality that there is no justice in love also. They lose all hope, they lose the light is gone from their life, and they want to take their life in their own hand, and they cut their wrist up, put it in water, see the red blood and the water turning all red in the basin. And he says, at that time stare and wonder what you have missed. Was it all worth it? Was your life worth the love? And then in stanza 11 he says, the glacier knocks in the cupboard, the desert sighs in the bed, and the crack in the teacup opens a lane to the land of the dead. Now he's giving you images from life and contrasting them with images of death. He says, the glacier knocks in the cupboard, the desert sighs in the bed. Now you know it is not possible. So time here is using the same technique that love used of hyperboles. Okay, but here he's also, it's not exactly hyperboles, but he is using opposing images. He's using contradictory images here to emphasize his point. He says the glacier knocks in this real world. What happens? The glacier knocks in the cupboard. The desert sighs in the beds. So there are no the cupboards don't have the warmth or the color, don't have the colorful clothes only hanging inside them, but there is that the look of the great grey, cold, white glacier. It has coldness about it. It has dullness about it. So the dullness here is contrasted with the vibrancy of colors of different clothes. Then the desert sighs in the bed. So the warmth of the bed is contrasted here with the desert sighs, with the infertility and the desolation of the deserts. And the crack in the teacup opens. And then he compares the crack in the teacup to a cleft on a mountainside, which results in a great fountain to erupt. So again, the image of death, and a lane to the land of the dead. And he says, what is it? This dream of the lover is a lane to the land of the dead. So actually leads us to death. So time here is reminding love that nothing is lasting in the world of these lovers. And he's reminding love also that it's not always happiness. It's so the hyperboles or the ecstatic state of happiness that the lovers were in, time is telling it to be realistic. Time is reminding it that life is a mixture of both. Life is a mixture of glaciers knocking in the cupboards, deserts sometimes sighing in the birds, cracks opening in the teacups, and the lanes full of people and life, lanes full of life leading sometimes to death. So life is what? Time is telling love that it is a mixture of pain. It's a mixture of pain and happiness. It is a mixture of sorrow and happiness. So by these contrasts, he's giving us the images of life, productivity and fertility, and contrasts them with the images of desolation, separation and death. In the next stanza he says, where the beggars raffle the banknotes, and the giant is enchanting to Jack, and the lily-white boy is a roarer, and Jill goes down on her back. Now he takes images from nursery rhymes, from children's nursery rhymes, and he talks about unimaginable paradoxes. Just like the unimaginable things that the love was talking about, he also uses unimaginable paradoxes here. So he inverts the nursery rhymes here and says that to remind love that everything here is unexpected. So he says, in this world things can change. There can be a twist in anything. There can be a twist in everything. The beggars can raffle the banknotes. The beggars, who are always in need of the money, they may even throw the banknotes. They may show that they do not want more money. The giant is enchanting to Jack, and this is a reference to the story of Jack and the beanstalk. He says the jack may become enchanted by the giant. He may fall in love with the giant. Where the lily-white boy is a roarer, where this sweet boy becomes a roarer, where Jill goes down, and this is the rhyme of the Jack and Jill. He says, Jill goes down on her back, rather than Jill coming stumbling down after Jack. He says she comes back on her back. She comes down on her back. In 13th stanza he says, oh look, look in the mirror, oh look in your distress. Life remains a blessing, although you cannot bless. The paradoxes return here. He says, look closely in the mirror, look, look in the mirror. Oh, look in your distress. The repetition. So he wants love to stop, to pause, and to think carefully. He says, look in your distress. Find sorrow in your happiness. Life is a blessing. It remains a blessing. But although you cannot bless, but you cannot always bless. You cannot always bless, because sometimes when you are distressed, he says, you cannot bless others. When you are unhappy, you cannot feel happy for others. So he says, understand the blessing of life. The blessing of life is change. It is not in something remaining the same or staying the same, but the blessing of life lies in change. Oh, stand, stand at the window, as the tears scald and start. You shall love your crooked neighbor with your crooked heart. Oh, stand, stand at the window. Then he's asking the love to stand at the window, and the tears, as the tears scald and start. Then the tears burn. Scald means burn. Burn your face, burn your cheeks, and are flowing down your cheeks. You shall love your crooked neighbor with your crooked heart. So he says, when reality strikes and your love has deceived you, your heart will burn and it will turn crooked. And you will learn your neighbor with a crooked heart. So again, this is, a strange expression that he uses here. He says, you shall love your crooked neighbor with a crooked heart. So that unreality is now removed from the sight of love. He says, you shall be able to see things clearly. You shall be able to see people in their actual true colors. So the neighbor will not appear, divine to you. He will appear crooked, and you yourself will be aware of your limitations. So you will be able to love back with your own crooked heart. But crooked here means dishonest. So he's talking about not the purity of feelings or emotions, or not the pure form of love, but a form of love which is tempered down with the reality, tempered by reality. In the next stanza he says, it was late, late in the evening, the lovers they were gone, the clocks had ceased their chiming, and the deep river ran on. Now the message from time ends, and now the poet is giving us his conclusion, and he recalls us back to the setting. He says, when this discussion between time and love ended, it was already late, late in the evening. So late that even the lovers were gone. The clocks had ceased their chiming, and the deep river ran on. The last line is significant. He says, and the deep river ran on. He says, so the river ran on in the same way as it did in the beginning. So with this discussion, he leaves the ending open for you. He leaves it open for the reader to understand and to make it their own interpretation. Let us now look at the analysis. The poem you saw was a form of a ballad. I told you in the opening of the poem also that it is written in a verse which is loose. So it is a ballad form, but it is made of 15 stanzas, consists of 15 rhymed quatrains. The poem is a meditation on love and the remorselessness of time. So it offers both. It offers us both, insights. It is a meditation on love, and it also shows a remorselessness of time. It is told in 3 voices, First we have the narrator, then we have the rapturous lover, and then we have the reproachful clock. So it has three voices, that of the narrator, that of the lover, and then the clock. And then the first 5 stanzas of the poem are apparently positive, apparently because they're about love, yet despite the ambience, the opening lines hide a sense of foreboding. And I did remark about it when I discussed the first stanza with you, where he says the life does not remain the same always. And this is what you find in these 2 lines. There is a clear element of foreshadowing in the first stanza through the following comparison. The crowds upon the pavement were fields of harvest wheat. Now this comparison is often overlooked or omitted. It is thought to be a mere contradicting use of rural imagery in an urban setting. Though when considering the fact that wheat about to be harvested is at the end of its life cycle, the comparison is really quite apt. And I made a point to you when we were discussing these lines, that harvest is a season is the cycle of when one cycle of nature is coming to an end. The crop is ready to be harvested. So it shows a change of time. So despite the fact that the first few stanzas show that everything is unchanging in life, when there is love, these lines hide the paradox. Time mocks a couple by reminding them that their lives are withering away regardless of how their time is spent. And this point is driven home by the statement, and time will have his fancy tomorrow or today. Now through altering the meaning of known nursery rhymes, Auden attempts to make a statement of how the things we perceive as youths might be completely different from our perception of the same things as adults. The ephemeral joys of childhood are dissipated by age and experience. We also talked about it. So ephemeral is a temporariness of joys. So this is what he's saying, that this passion, intensity of the felt by the youth, by the lovers at that time, it is passing. It will evaporate with time. So their experience is different at the moment because they are young. But as they will reach adulthood, they will be able to see the change in them, which is brought about by time. So it is not love which is the victor, it is time which is the victor. In every aspect of life, we are continuously reminded of our mortality. Watching our surroundings grow older, our habits and hobbies become obsolete, and witnessing the death of friends and family, a death often accompanied by complications. So this is what the time is reminding lovers of, that we are always reminded of mortality. We are always distressed by sorrows in our life, and we are always changing with time. The poem, the last point is, the poem may also suggest Auden's lack of faith in humanity. And generally, I told you that it may refer not just to this discussion between time and love, but it may refer generally to Auden not trusting the faithfulness of the society or the humanity in general. The last lines are significant as they show that even after the lovers have left and the clocks have ceased their chiming, the river inexorably runs on, a clear indication that time continues to pass despite the absence of the time personified. So although the time personified time is now gone, but the river moves on, it passes on. So the time keeps on changing. Time does keep on, brings change in the lives of the people. Time does affect love also, although the young lovers may not be aware of it at the moment, but time is bringing a gradual change in their feelings and in their emotions. So in the end, the poem is about the victory of time over love. Another simple poem by Auden, and we come to the end of that poem, and we come to the end of our syllabus with Auden also. We have looked at in quite a detail at the different stages that poetry has taken shape over time. And we can also see that actually, if I link it to the theme of the poem, how time has actually won over a single stage or a single moment in history. So time has brought about change in attitudes, in manners, in techniques, in style. But all of that we shall look at it again in the next lecture. So I would like to leave you here with the analysis of these last three poets belonging to the modernist tradition and the symbolist movement, and how their works were highly symbolic and consisted of images and metaphors and similes, and how their works appeared to have have ambiguity and appear to have contradictions, and appeared not to have clear-cut interpretations for the readers. With this, we come to the end of this lecture. I shall meet you again in the next lecture, where I am going to recap everything for you, and we're going to review this course, and we're going to review this subject, and we shall see the path that we have traversed. In fact, we shall analyze the path that we have covered so far. So I shall meet you again in the next lecture. Till then, I take leave. Thank you.